Recently, a lot of product photography / videography and stuff that you can do in your own house going on at the moment due to the current situation and being confined to the house. So we're going through a little behind the scenes on how to do a product video in your own home, and most importantly, how to do it on a budget. I've seen a few videos like this that are really good, but they're using gear and lighting like aperture 300Ds and motorized sliders and stuff that's not generally affordable to everyone, especially those that are just starting out. So we're gonna go through the gear that I use for this shoot, and in terms of that gear, the first thing you're gonna need is obviously some sort of camera, preferably one that can shoot slow motion. So I'm gonna be using the Canon 80D for this entire thing. And then with that, you're gonna need some sort of tripod. This is just a cheap one, but it definitely does the job. And if you don't have a tripod for any reason, then just use some boxes or something like that to lock the camera off and keep it stable. Moving on to the lights. The key light and the light being used right now is the Pixel K80S. It's just an LED panel light that lets you adjust the temperature and the brightness of the light. So I think I paid around 280 Australian dollars for this. So nice and affordable, and it's actually gonna be the most expensive light that we're using today. Moving on from that, the next two lights we're using as the backlight and the rim light are just LED floodlights bought from the local hardware store, which for us in Australia is good old Bunnings. Now these cost about $20 to $30 each. They're a 30-watt LED panel, and they come set at 5600 Kelvin, which is a nice cool white light similar to what we're using right now. The last lights are just small rectangle LED torches, again bought from the hardware store. So we're gonna use these to put behind the bottle and make it glow, and then probably use a practical light like this one here just to put in the background somewhere. Lights out the way, I'm just gonna use some sort of diffusion for some of those lights, and I've got a circular diffusion panel that I bought from Amazon, as well as some diffusion sheet that I had from a cheap softbox. That's a tongue twister. Diffusion sheet from a cheap softbox that I used to have. If you don't have access to something like this, then you can literally just use a white business shirt or a thin white t-shirt and then hang that in front of your light just to soften it up a little bit. So good, cheap alternative there. Right, that's the gear, and now on to choosing the backdrop. Like I said, we want to be able to film this without leaving the house. So I've got a few different backdrops available to me here. The first is a rustic exposed brick feature wall, which for a whiskey or a beer shoot is going to work really well. Recently, I've used that quite a bit, and I want to try something new, and not everyone is going to have something like that available to them. So we'll go for something a bit more plain and simple. The kitchen unit here has some black paneling around it. So we're going to go with that, and let's get onto the setup. So pretty simple setup. I've just used a wooden chopping board and propped it up slightly to make filming a little bit easier. I've then left a bit of a gap between the base and the backdrop. So if you've got the room, I'd probably suggest leaving a bit more of a gap just to give a bit more depth. But if not, then doing what I've done will work just fine. So with the lighting, I started with one of the LED floodlights and pointed it at the backdrop just to separate the foreground and the background. Now, a little tip is don't throw out the boxes for the gear that you've bought, because you never know when they're going to come in handy. So with that set up, that's the first light out the way. The second light is the other LED floodlight that I wanted to use as a top light, and just to give a bit of a rim to the top of the bottle, as well as further separate the foreground and the background. So for this, we're going to put it above and slightly behind the bottle. So when you're doing this sort of thing, and especially when you're working on a budget, not everything is going to click and screw together flush and look really nice. So that is where these things come in handy. So for the second light, which was going to act as a rim light for the back of the bottle, the LED floodlight was going to be way too hard of a light just to point at the back, and it was going to cast shadows that I didn't really want. So I wanted to attach some diffusion to that, and basically I've just cable tied some diffusion cloth around the entire panel. We're then going to hang it to this boom mic stand, cable tie the cable out the way. Doesn't look pretty, but definitely does the job. The third light is just one of the LED torches to go behind the bottle and make it glow. So for this, you're just gonna have to take the back label off the bottle or whatever it is that you're using, just so the light can hit the glass and then illuminate the liquid a little bit easier. I've then just taken some blue tack and stuck it to the back of the chopping board and angled it upwards into the back of the bottle. Obviously had to use some sort of weight to put behind that, stop it from falling over as well. straight away noticed this was way too bright and created a hotspot on the label. So to fix this, I needed to diffuse the light, and I just used some thin paper that came out of a box that something fragile got delivered in, cut it to fit the size of the LED torch, blue tacked it on, made a huge difference, and no more hotspot. I did the key light last, which is the main LED panel on a stand. Now I put this about 45 degrees off to the right and pointed it down towards the front of the bottle. This is to light up the label, which is obviously the most important part. This light comes with a small magnetic diffusion panel that just clips onto the front of the light, makes it a bit softer and takes away some of those hard shadows. So after that, that is your scene set up and lit. Getting into the actual filming, this is where you can be as creative as you want with the angles and whatnot, but for this, a majority of the shots were filmed locked off on a tripod. I've then added a push or a pull in post using keyframes on the scale, just to give it a bit of cinematic movement. So I started with the front on shots of the bottle, then the pouring shots, the label shot, and the outro shot. Last minute decision was to throw the smoke machine in there, so I pointed that at the backdrop and filmed it in slow motion just to give it a bit of mood. And that shot turned out really nice. Smoke machine cost me about $60 and I bought it about 8 years ago when I was a little wannabe DJ. If you don't have one, don't worry about it, you can get away without the smoke. So as I said, all of those shots were filmed on a tripod and had the movement added in post. For the top down shot of the bottle, I just scaled the shot up slightly and then keyframed the rotation to go from -3 degrees to +3 degrees, just to give it a bit of rotational cinematic movement. The shots with in-camera movement were just filmed handheld with the strap pulled tight around my neck. I filmed them in 60 frames per second so that I could slow them down in post and then throw warp stabilizer on top in Premiere Pro just to smooth them out and make them look all nice and tasty. Warp stabilizer can be a lifesaver, but it doesn't always work and it can sometimes warp your shots. So I did a few takes on each shot and got a variety of angles just in case some of them didn't work. So that's the setup and filming, and after that it's just color grading to your taste. All in all, pretty basic and inexpensive. And obviously from there you can get into more depth in terms of creative angles, getting people involved, or having a bigger scene. But for being on a budget and using what's directly available to you to get results like that, all in all, pretty effective. So that is it for this video today. If you have any questions about anything in particular, please drop a comment. If you like this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you very soon. Peace.